Hey there everybody, my name is Snitch and welcome back to another episode of CO Select. Today's match is a tier 1 match on Cycles to Gehenna. Covered this map before in the past, but it's a pretty interesting map. Playing against Slame today. Slame's a very high rated player. Consistently between 1000 to 1200 rating. I think they're on a bit of a loss streak lately, but it happens to everybody. I'm sure they'll make their way back up. And yeah, very talented player. This is pretty much actually, I think, the first game I've won against them in like 6 or 7 in a row. Spoilers, but you know, I was really happy with this game because I did actually manage to win it. It's a very interesting game. We're playing Hawk versus Von Bolt. Hawk's day today is he gets an additional 10% firepower bonus for all of his units all the time. His CO power is Black Wave. It deals mass damage to the opponent of 1, and also heals all of his allied units for 1 as well. And then Black Storm, his superpower, is the same effect, but with the value of 2. And Von Bolt, his day-to-day is kind of an improved version of Hawk, where he gets 10% additional firepower and 10% additional defense on all of his units, and he only has a superpower, which is Ex Machina, which deals a 2-range missile, which drops a 2-range missile on the highest value location for your opponent that deals 3 damage and disables all those units on the next turn. We've seen Von Bolt before, and his super is obviously very good at ending the game. Very exceptional power. This matchup's actually very interesting. I think most people actually think it's Hawk favored. Both COs obviously have this very long super meter. It takes a very long time for them to charge it up. And they spend most of the game building it. But Hawk can, you know, obviously Black Storm is so much value, 20% of your opponent's army in damage, and just all the healing is kind of, if Hawk could play like a full map game, and instead of controlling on a single area, like Ex Machina obviously very powerful, but very isolated on one front. If you're able to control the multiple fronts with Hawk, and then affect the whole battle with Black Storm, you can kind of edge out in other places on the map. Get an advantage. Cycles to Gehenna, interesting map. Lots of these central properties are not necessarily decided. Obviously, most maps, it's fairly decided which army will get which properties because of the way the map is and how quickly infantry can get to those locations. But a lot of these central ones are actually quite contestable. You get a lot of infantry in positions like this one, where they can move to either city, depending on how your opponent has positioned their units already. And actually, these side properties are also quite contestable. This port, and this city, and even this city, are very easy to threaten with your double base formation. You know, you have this already captured base and this neutral base here, so it's quite easy to threaten up the sides. But even these 2 properties next to the HQ can be quite easy to capture, although it can be locked with an allied artillery or an allied rocket over the wall and prevent your opponent from contesting them. So it's not impossible to hold them, but they can be hard to capture yourself. It's very easy for tanks to come out and threaten this location before you can get both of these properties if you don't go for them quickly. So I was very happy with my capture phase this game. It's one thing I talk about. I think the way I played the early game built me up an advantage. Do have some fumbles in the mid game. Wouldn't be me if I didn't. But overall, I think it's a pretty enjoyable game. Last thing to mention, I guess, is the comm towers. There's 2 towers that are basically free captures for your units. While these properties are contestable, this one is not so much. The tower is very hard to get to. And there's also these expansion towers and these 2 cities on the island. Once you get your airport, you can build a T-copter, fly it over, and you get an additional tower and the cities. And obviously, for both of us, towers are very relevant, especially when he has 10% defense. Any more firepower I can get is very good, but both of us will be fighting at 130 firepower base when we have our both towers activated. So we'll definitely both be looking to expand this game. So let's just get straight into it. Oh, you know, day 1, standard infantry build. Hope we're all doing well today. I'll just start bantering instead of talking about the, you know, the same capture phase. Going for my closest properties first. Obviously go for this one because it's got a chain of 2. Just making efficient movements. Both me and my opponent. Moving for the base. The neutral factory. They get a little bit faster than me because of the second turn advantage. Or the second turn. First turn advantage, second turn balancer, I should say. No second turn advantage. Just standard movements so far. Moving out for properties. I move here first because this gets me to this capture chain of 2. And I did mention these can be quite difficult to hold if you don't get to them early. You know, once tanks come out on day 5, day 6, they can very quickly get to this location and prohibit you from capturing these cities. So I do like to try and make sure I can get to them as quickly as possible, as efficiently as possible. There we go. First tank comes out. Did I say day 6? I obviously meant day 4. Day 5? I think it's a day behind, right? Must be day 5. Methinks. Maybe it is day 4. Who knows? My first tank comes out on my strong side as well, so both of us building on the strong side. This is always a choice to make, right? I can either build a tank here to try and hold their tank, or I can delay and build my own tank on my strong side, and then we both have offensive pressure. So it's always just kind of like a trade-off in playstyle, whether you want to defensively respond to your opponent or also play to your strong side. I think generally playing to your strong side is the better move, because you kind of, you know, set up your own ability, like the only area where you're winning the game, right? If you always play defensively on your weak side, eventually you're going to get overwhelmed here. So while you might save some value early, generally it's better, I think, just to play defensively where you're weaker and just focus on aggression on your stronger side. It's kind of something I've been learning recently. Moving my tank up neutrally, my opponent does the same. There's a little more to this right area, which I think is fine, but also I think it's easier for me to not go for these properties immediately if I don't feel safe, whereas my opponent wants to go for these central properties. So I think my tank is in a slightly better position because it can actually approach the more properties in the center easier than this tank, which is kind of more isolated to this right area. So while it is locking down, you know, this port, this city, almost hitting the comm tower, it's not threatening, you know. I could start moving towards these central properties. Even this property is not targetable by this tank, so I can actually move on to this, and I should be able to get it as well, whereas my opponent couldn't even move for this property, you know, if they were able to, because I'm able to hit. I'm covering the city, you know, I'm covering this city, this central city as well, so my opponent's forced to take the defensive one next turn, assuming I don't move. They actually move on to this tank, further isolating it on this right area, but it is locking down these properties for me, so I won't have the opportunity to go for them. I did end up building a defensive tank here to cover this infantry. So actually, I mean, I'm not under a lot of threat here because I can have a tank ready to cover. My opponent builds a defensive tank as well, trying to hold back some of my aggression. And they build actually 2 tanks this turn and an infantry. I actually don't have the money for that this turn, so people get a slightly better build than me. So yeah, I move up capturing some of these neutrals. We just handshake this trade here. And I move up, get a free hit on this infantry because the tank is not in range. Just taking free damage and also getting an even better central position, you know, threatening this property, threatening this property. Still covering this one. Like, all 3 of these neutral properties are now inaccessible for my opponent. Unless they move their tank as well, obviously. Yeah, moving more of my infantry to get in position to capture. I threatened this one here as well. Obviously my opponent wants to go for like these captures. Start getting the comm tower, which I've started capturing, by the way. Because I you know, the fights are starting. I've already taken a hit, so getting my comm tower next turn will enable this tank to do even more damage. But yeah, I move here to like threaten this allied city, so it either forces the tank to come here or one of these infantry to kind of sit on this square, because if they both go for the captures and the tank moves to the right to cover this tank, I can just walk in and start capping this for free, you know. Either my opponent has to cancel the capture or just trade the city, and it just feels really bad. Get another tank on the left side. I do put an artillery here. It was just basically my fun, efficient move. It's a bit of an early artillery. I don't have much of a wall yet, you know. There's not that many infantry down here. It's hard to get many units, but it does have some good spots on this mountain range that they can sit. If you get it, like, you know, if you get it here, you can cover these 3 cities. You know, if I get it back here, I can maybe cover away with this tank. I mean, when there's only 1 tank, I mean, there's 2 obviously coming, but when there's only 1 tank, I think getting an artillery can be kind of easy to set up, because even if they hit the artillery, a lot of the times you just get a tank hit back, and it's not really a worthwhile trade. So yeah, this tank will actually end up moving on the left to cover this infantry, like I said, and then suddenly this tank is once again completely free. Nothing's covering it. Another tank does come out. I've denied this city, which is pretty important, whereas I'm capturing it, so it's pretty important that my opponents are getting that neutral. And I'm also getting the port. Obviously they're getting this city that I'm not getting, so I guess that's the trade-off, is I'm getting this central city, but my opponent isn't. But they're getting this city, and I'm not yet, so... But a thing to notice is, while they are getting this city, it's actually, very interestingly, right within range of a tank attack. So it's actually even very hard to capture this city aggressively. And like I said, this is kind of my opponent's defensive side, so you could argue this is a little bit too greedy. Especially when I'd already built a tank here, right? They see the tank, and they also have a tank covering, but I can just build another tank here. Like I said, this is literally within 1 move, so any attack I make here, I can instantly reinforce with the chain. So maybe my opponent didn't kind of recognize this condition of the map. Because I think if you know this capture is a little bit greedy and very hard to pull off. They end up capturing the city on this side. So a little bit behind in income right now for me, but I am capping properties this turn. I'm picking up 4 actually, so it puts me at 17k plus my comm tower. My opponent's also going for this aggressive capture. This is kind of like the concept of free dudes that I keep talking about lately, is it's like, this kind of capture is really greedy in a situation where you have no units to back it up. Like, none of these tanks are in range to stop this tank, and, you know, unlike this free hit I got where the infantry will heal and it goes to 7, it's not the end of the world. Taking a free hit here where it goes to like 5 or lower, and it should be lower now because I have the comm tower as well, I think it should go to 4. Feels particularly bad. Okay, it did go to 4. I was wrong. I mean 5. But even still, it could have gone to 4, I think. So yeah, get the tank hit here. Move these units up to block on the right, so they can't keep going for the capture and hit my tank. They have to drop the capture. Build another tank to reinforce instantly, like I said. Oops, I think I skipped my builds, but I think it was just 2 infantry. So I only have 13k. Move my artillery up into this mountain range, covering this city as well. That's the other thing. Obviously, my opponent is pressuring a lot of tanks here, and they want to try and capture this. So I figured if I just RT lock it, it makes it really hard for them. I'm also kind of covering this infantry a little bit from a 2-hit. And yeah, I just build 2 infantry. Getting my airport now. My opponent's almost on their airport as well. Tanks give up on this formation, presumably because of the artillery, and start moving more towards the center. Do take the opening hit on my tank here. This does hurt a little bit, but at the same time, I'm right next to my cities. I have this this reinforcing tank. And again, I could just keep reinforcing this area. Like, it takes my opponent 2 turns to get here, and that's something to think about. Like, even though the opening of this fight looks quite bad for me, right? Because obviously I took a 9-4. I can actually just keep reinforcing this area forever. Like, as long as I have 7,000 funding, there's nothing that my opponent can do to actually match me in theory, because it's always taking them 2 turns to get their tanks here, right? Whereas for me, it's just 1 turn. So I'm always slightly ahead of the reinforcements. So even though I can afford to take some bad trades here, because I'll just be able to keep reapplying pressure to this area and forcing my opponent to waste more and more turns and resources getting more tanks in. Interesting thing, by the way, is my opponent has not gone for the comm tower yet. You could say this because of this kind of like greedy city attempt, but they haven't actually even got anywhere close to it yet, whereas I already have mine, so I do have a comm tower advantage, which means I'm hitting at 120 and my opponent's only hitting at 110 for now. They move in, get an aggressive interrupt on my infantry here. They actually just go for a hit on this infantry, which I thought was kind of weird, considering I'm sitting... Oh, it was the 2 hit, sorry. I do actually finish it off, damn. It wasn't weird at all. And they start capturing this property, but I've already got the artillery here in position, like I said. I was kind of predicting these movements, that my opponent would play aggressive here on the right, especially because I don't have that many units down here, and I am, you know, this is my weaker side. So I was just playing more defensively. I've started really respecting artillery on the weaker side. It's much easier to just play defensive and kind of hold a position than have to worry about pushing out or anything. And obviously artillery are great for that. If you want to just wall up an area and like hold these 3 cities, for example, like just holding these 3 cities, I feel like is a pretty good win for me on this side. Especially because I got this one, which is a very aggressive neutral city. So as soon as I get these 3 cities, then I can literally RT lock all of them. And you know, unless my opponent is literally capping multiple of them per turn and I have no other units, it's really hard for them to capture any of these. So, you know, I was pretty happy just getting an artillery here and holding the line. Move this infantry out to just get a bigger interrupt so I can pull my tank back and put it on the city. Taking out this infantry. Once again, it's just kind of free dudes, you know? My opponent is just kind of throwing away infantry for captures, and this is traditionally a pretty bad habit. Unless you have some way to, you know, pressure me from taking it. But the way I move my units here, you know, I got the infantry on the mountain. This one might go down, but again, you know, you have to move more infantry into the range of this tank on the city. And, you know, one tank on being able to move on planes without comm tower isn't just going to come up and hit my tank and put me in any danger, you know, so... Defensive moving my infantry up. I actually ended up pulling back for now because I don't want to hit into this tank. I couldn't get a good 2-hit, but I ended up just blocking off. You know, none of these tanks can reach through the infantry. I start healing my tank up, and also I've completely delayed this capture for a really long time. My opponent is in no position to be getting to this city anytime soon, especially if they want to get their comm tower as well. You know, this infantry is only 5 HP. This one is full HP, but it takes 2 turns to get here. They really have to shuffle their positioning. And it will either take, you know, 5 turns or 4 turns for this infantry to get it, and obviously it's within 1 shot from a tank. Or it will take this infantry 3 turns to get here, then they're delaying their comm tower even more. You know, I'm just really confident in this position now. I'm just going to sit here and heal this tank up on the front line, walling off with some infantry and just preparing for a future battle. I don't feel the need to just throw resources into this when I couldn't get a good 2-hit angle because of, like, the terrain. Obviously, you have to approach from the plains. You can't approach from the right. So it would have been impossible for me to hit the tank twice without moving this one. And also, yeah, again, I don't even need to take these fights right now. It's much easier for me to reinforce this area in the future, and my opponent isn't contesting any properties, so I have nothing to stop her anymore. These tanks are just sitting here, basically covering nothing. I've just pulled a bunch of resources to the left, while also kind of pressuring the center. And, you know, these tanks are just now here, kind of doing nothing. No, my opponent isn't even capturing any properties. I get the artillery interrupt on this unit down here. Get a big hit on this infantry, finish it off. Move my tank over to the left to cover these infantry. Tank isn't in range of any of these infantry on the right anymore. This area is not really being pressured, nor can my opponent really accomplish anything with my 2 infantry here and my artillery locking the cities. So I'm feeling pretty fine. Just moving the tank on the left, getting it more towards the center, because it kind of feels like where most of the resources are being spent. And I get a triple tank buy. Feels really good, man. Couple of 1,000 income ahead right now. But my opponent is capturing 3 cities this turn. I'm only getting 1 next turn. See what they go for. Yeah, they get their caps. Move the tank back to get healed. And they start moving for the comm tower finally. Moving this tank towards the center. Infantry goes on the HQ. They finish off my infantry on the mountain. And they start, once again, offensively pressuring this right area. But it's going to be so hard to break this artillery lock at this point. You know, they might go for the port. I would assume that's the plan. But, this city is pretty much off limits now with the artillery and positioning, and that's why I say I really like the artillery on defensive sides, especially in scenarios like this where you could just create a complete lock scenario. You know, unless my opponent has a really offensive push right next to my factory, there's just no way for them to be able to do anything. I take the finish off on this infantry. I move on to the defensive city, bring another tank up, so I've got 2 tanks to 2 here. Move my artillery forwards a bit, because these cities are no longer under threat, so I just get like a better defense over here. Pull more infantry forwards to wall a bit. I start capping this neutral city actually, because now I have like 3 tanks here to 2 tanks, and my opponent's pulling a lot of resources to the center. So, you know, you see how I'm always really flexible with the way that I'm attacking. You know, if I see my opponent is putting a lot of units over here, I just pull back and wall off and just start healing and then just chill. You know, if I see my opponent starting to pull a lot of resources to the center, you know, these tanks are moving, this tank's moved over instead of coming to the left to reinforce. Now I know I have a tank advantage on the left. So then I just push in and start trying to capture this city instead. I'm always just kind of like trying to make my opponent swing their resources around in really inefficient ways. They're struggling to get a strong foothold in any scenario. Technically, I have 5 tanks over here. You know, these are all almost in range. So yeah, I'm kind of positioning aggressively on these like middle properties that I own, so I can pressure both the center, cover these infantry, and pressure this left side as well. So I actually just have like a really strong formation in general. Build my T-Copter, getting ready to do the island expansion. Feeling really good about my tempo this game. Like I said, I really liked my capture phase. Felt really confident in the positioning of my units right now. So I just built my T-Copter and just try to go for aggressive expansion. Because it really feels a lot better to do this when you're in a winning position. As soon as you're in a position that's not as effective, you know, as soon as you're losing, this can be really hard to justify because it's just kind of like 5,000 money that isn't on tanks that are or tanks or artillery or whatever unit, you know, any combat units that are helping you. But when I'm winning and I feel like I have control over literally every front, honestly, really confident in my unit positioning right now. Just doing this puts a lot of pressure on my opponent because, you know, if they aren't able to get a foothold in any of these locations in the next few turns, I'm just going to expand, get another comm tower, get 2 additional properties that my opponent can't access without matching me, and then end up falling behind pretty hard. So finally, start capturing their comm tower. Go for this neutral city again, move their units up. This tank comes down. This tank's on the right, so I push the decision defensively. They do get a T-Copter, and they actually end up buying a rocket. Man, I thought this was crazy. But it's kind of like the advanced version, I guess, of buying an artillery. Like, this is a huge fun sink, though. I think I definitely could have responded to this better. But I kind of just, you know, acknowledging that this is a massive fun sink for my opponent for a unit that is really going to struggle to do anything other than cover this area. I don't think I respond to it, not at all, but I think I definitely could have done more. They actually go for an aggressive hit on this infantry, kind of a free hit. Is it? Yeah, I guess it is. Sucks to be me. Clever spot from my opponent. And they start moving forward for these properties again, and once again they peel off of... Oh, my bad. Once again they peel off of this right area, you know, because I've just got such a good defensive formation, and they start pushing towards the center again, you know. They just can't seem to decide where they want to attack. Full on, they don't want to commit to any hard engagements. And I am going to end up picking up this property. I'll go for a double hit on this infantry. I think I chose to hit the infantry. I actually take strikes on the tanks as well. Oh, because I just have the artillery covering, you know. I'm feeling pretty good about any fights here because I have really good artillery positioning. I suppose technically it's breakable here by, you know, hitting, going around, and then moving the tank in. But then they're kind of ignoring both of my tanks. I can get another 2 hit. It might be a bit too aggressive, honestly. Maybe I regret going for this, but... I guess I felt confident that if they broke my wall, it was going to be inefficient for them in the long run. That's another thing about artillery is, you know, obviously a lot of formations rely on kind of like breaking through and pushing the artillery back, but if you take too much damage in return doing that, it can totally not even be worth it. So that's why even like aggressive artillery positioning can sometimes get a lot of value, but not super sure about this formation, to be honest. Take a hit on this infantry with my other infantry, move up my tanks. See, I just rotate my tanks here. I've already got this property, my work here is done. I even moved this infantry up to threaten the port to force my opponent to keep units here. Yeah, just move up all my tanks into the center. I've got 4 tanks to 2 here directly. And yeah, I guess also because I'm moving all my tanks here, I suppose 5. Because I'm moving all my tanks to the center, by attacking here, it once again forces my opponent to kind of make decisions on where to split their forces. And they only have so many tanks, you know. I've got like, you know, 7, 8 tanks in this circle. 8 tanks here now, whereas my opponent has 5, 6 if you count this one. So yeah, they obviously just don't have the forces that I do in this direct area because they've got 2 tanks up here kind of hovering. It just forces my opponent to make a choice. Do build my first B-copter here. Another tank on the bottom side, 2 infantry. B-copter to just kind of cover more offensive hits from this tank necessarily. Rockets moves down. It's got a pretty good range of influence here. Even this property is no longer safe. But actually, it doesn't really hit any of these relevant fights in the center. So I think, you know, it's plausible to play around, but it does definitely have a fairly impactful area. This tank actually moves back and gets the hit. This is the only thing I didn't see. I think this is the only thing that made this tank not great, was not checking for this tank. I think I didn't look for it. I'm actually going to losing quite a lot of ground back here, which definitely does not feel good. So this is a pretty big mistake on my end. Definitely a little bit too aggressive. Like I said, you really do have to be careful on your defensive side. It's not the end of the world. I just lost some units. I could just retreat and hold it, but... And like I said, when my opponent does this, it does also free up a lot of the center. Like, suddenly I can just get free hits here all the way around, you know? And start contesting some of these properties, maybe. More tanks moving to the right here. Their whole army pivots over here. Do build an anti-air, a mech, a B-copter, and an infantry. So they got their first B-copter as well, and the anti-air responds to mine. Moving my T-copter back, start capturing this comm tower, move my copter up. Copter over here should be quite helpful as well. Obviously they built an anti-air, but it does give me, like, with this mountain range, some ways to play around it. I move my units back. I hit my opponent's infantry here. This is always a really good thing to do if you're losing as well. It's just taking infantry trades and just limiting the health value of your opponent's foot soldiers is really good, because suddenly it means that even if my opponent keeps attacking through here, they can't actually get any, you know, property value, because these infantry are too low to be capturing properties. So if you're out of position where you're like losing ground, just kind of hitting your opponent's foot soldiers on the way out could be a really significant thing to do. Start capturing my... So that's my opponent properties, you know. If they want to keep maintaining this attack, they have to ignore this unit. So a tank has to come back here, but I have so many tanks covering this area as well. Like I said, when my opponent forces, you know, pivots their whole army over here, obviously it's winning them this side of the fight, right? But suddenly I have all these tanks in the center that are now kind of unanswered. I can move my whole army up and start pressuring my opponent's properties. I even start capturing this port up here as well, because these tanks are peeling off to the right. You see, every time my opponent moves, I'm always pressuring in the areas that they're leaving behind. Obviously I went too far here, right? I took way more damage than I should. But at the same time, you know, I'm getting so much positioning power from the rest of the map. You know, I've got this copter covering all these attacks as well. And it's threatening this right side. This copter's in a really good neutral position where it's like threatening all these units over here, and it's covering all these units over here. So the anti-air can't really cover both that effectively. Other world anti-air and a tank, and a tank. Now this is the turn where... I think I just have to make the medium tank play. Definitely regretted this in hindsight. I think it should have just been... What have I got, 23? I think, honestly, yeah, it should have just been, like, medium tank, maybe, like, artillery infantry or something. I think it just had to be a medium tank down here. After I made this critical mistake where I lost a lot of units, I think just dropping a medium tank here would totally lock my opponent off. But honestly, I was looking at this and I thought with my center position, my opponent wouldn't push in that aggressively and be able to get that much done. But it was definitely a mistake in hindsight going for the double tank anti-air here. Very greedy. I think I should have just dropped a medium tank, gone like infantry, artillery, and then I would have had really solid defensive positioning. My opponent would be able to break this, and it would kind of limit all their options because the center's looking really bad for them. They're kind of at a tank disadvantage overall, and I have the copter. And then they wouldn't be able to fight down here either. If they pushed in, they would be pushing into a medium tank. They'd just take a bunch of damage in response. But I definitely went a little bit greedy here. So getting interrupted this aggressive capturing infantry. Didn't really expect to get that, just kind of wasting time. Lose this tank to a 2-hit. Lose this tank. Lose this artillery from the city. Yeah. Take a big hit on my infantry. My opponent isn't actually contesting any properties, so I have that going for me. And also they've given up this center property. Obviously, like I said, these units had to come and hit this if they wanted to save this. So I'm actually going to get this center capture. Not going to get the port, sadly. My opponent gets aggressive interrupt. Moving more infantry up. The tanks once again swing back, coming to defend this area. Copter flying down to the center. They have a mech moving forward, which I think is weird. I think just building a mech in general is generally pretty weird, unless the map is smaller, but it could have some pressure. So yeah, definitely a mistake on my end, not just dropping bigger units, just teching up to like hold this defense. Because I think as soon as I held this push, I'd be totally fine. And I think I just ended up building the medium tank a little bit too late. I think I do go for it this turn, maybe. But it's just later than it should be, really. One turn sooner would have been in a great spot. But I do have a bunch of tanks rotating over here as well. You know, I get the city, 23k to 20k, by the way, in terms of production. Income, so I'm actually at quite a significant city advantage now, and it's mostly because, you know, my opponent just got this city, but they've been delayed by quite a lot on a lot of their properties. Obviously, this rockets was like the thing that made this capture possible at this point. Just go for a first strike of this tank. No, I built another tank. Okay, this turn definitely should have been the medium tank then. If not the last turn, then this turn for sure. Yeah, I knew I definitely messed it up, but I didn't realize I was this greedy about it. I think I go... Yeah, once again, I just felt like I just underestimated how much offensive power my opponent had. I just thought with like the tanks here and this copter in position that my opponent wouldn't want to push in, but they just really felt confident about this area, so I thought they would peel back and kind of like help with the center, because I have a great infantry line coming up here. You know, I've got all my units kind of swinging over, but they just push it even further, and I think it just kind of caught me off guard. I just didn't think they would have this much, you know, offensive ability. Just because I had the infantry as well, I thought I'd be able to block off enough attacks to be able to like hold it, but they actually push it really aggressively. End up blocking my factory. Looks pretty bad. They do start capturing this property, but this infantry is wounded, like I said, right? So it's going to take them longer, which gives me more time to recover the position. So yeah, if not the last turn, then definitely this turn should have been the medium tank. Super greedy. I went for a battlecopter instead, that's what I bought. But it should have just been medium tank instead of tank battlecopter, and then I would have, again, just completely shut down this push and been totally fine. I mean, here it's even better, because my opponent is even more committed at this point, and dropping a medium tank now would have just completely limited their ability to be offensive here. But they did build an artillery to kind of, like, be ready for this, so they didn't expect me to build a medium tank, I would say, as most of the time when you build an artillery in this kind of position. It's either because you're just really confident in your wall, which they do have a lot of tanks, or because you suspect a medium tank. So I would assume my opponent was suspecting a medium tank here. I just kind of didn't end up dropping it. Once again, they're going for these center captures. Mech rolls up. Another battlecopter. 3 copters from my opponent now. Another tank and an infantry. They have finished their expansion comm tower as well. Supers are almost online. I do swing the copter down here just to kill this. I kind of feel like I have to finish off another tank. Start hitting some infantry here. Just picking off units where I can. I also get the hit on this artillery, which I feel like was kind of good. I have tanks covering this tank, and they only have like 1 tank up here. These ones can't get back, so I felt like getting a free hit on this infantry or this artillery was really strong. Especially because this is the turn I am going to build a medium tank. I always knew it would happen. Going for some offensive hits, get the infantry hit on the mech. Always super valuable, obviously. 1k into 3k, and the whole purpose of these mechs is just to hit tanks, right? So as soon as you get infantry hits into mechs, it's always super big. Just getting some more hits here. I think I made a mistake with the anti-air. I think I was just too aggressive. I could have just gone for the infantry double hit. But I wanted to get the first strike on this tank, but I think it was too much. Just kind of bad microfighting. I could have just been more confident taking the infantry double hit and leaving my vehicles behind all my infantry ready for counterattacks, and I think it would have been stronger. So I think I went a little bit over-aggressive here, just going for a tank first strike as well, when it wasn't really impactful. I actually ended up leaving some infantry and rockets here as well. It happens, I guess. Moving this artillery up, getting another copter. Finally dropped the medium tank, which will just shut down this push for now. But it was definitely a bit late, and I am losing a copter to the anti-air as a result. But at the same time, it's not a total wash, because this is a lot of power generation, and we are fairly close to supers, and supers would definitely be a big part of this game, especially when the armies are very big. It's obviously very valuable for me, and less valuable for my opponent, because like I said, Von Bolt's super is very focused on a specific front, whereas mine is a lot more general and just kind of affects the whole map. And obviously, you know, there's like 3 fronts here that are big forts, so the whole map is very relevant. They're doing a rocket one-shot on my infantry. Finish off that copter, get a big hit on this tank, start capturing my port. Finish off my tank. T-copter another mechan. The artillery hits this infantry to interrupt, which I thought was kind of funny. Get a 2-hit KO on my tank. It kind of sucks. Yeah, I guess I had a copter here as well, and it's all just because I'm having to like make big sacrifices to kind of like hold these areas. So yeah, I'm definitely losing a lot of units here. This turn really sucks for me. Finish off the tank. Like I said, just push too far forwards here. Should have just let the infantry get the hits and then just held the property with infantry, and then it would have been a lot better. But having like units ready for counterattacks, I think. Because I ended up losing my anti-air here, or at least taking a lot of damage on it, which is obviously super not good. My opponent builds tank, artillery. Supers are almost up. They didn't manage to get it this turn, but I do manage to get mine this turn. So Black Storm comes out. What was the swing? 30k swing for my opponent. They lose 30k value instantly. I actually ended up getting this property. Yeah, I thought this was kind of funny. My opponent kind of like didn't think about the fact that I would be able to Black Storm this. So I do Black Storm this. I end up sneaking this property, which puts it to 24 to 19. This is actually a really big win, I think. Normally, obviously, I wouldn't be able to get this because they hit it with the artillery, but because I had the Black Storm, I ended up healing this infantry up and getting the capture. I think they didn't think about it. So yeah, I do go for some fights here. Obviously, my anti-air gets healed a bit, so I do end up getting a big hit on this copter. It's kind of too low for me to warrant holding it, so I do end up sacking it just to get a big swing. Start capturing this offensive property. So yeah, with my super, I do get some good trade backs here. Get a solid fight in the center. I was pretty happy with that. My medium tank picks up this tank. I leave the anti-air alive for now because I don't have any copters in this area anyway, and it's kind of out of the way, stuck behind this mountain range. I'd rather take out the tanks because they have more threat on the rest of my units. Whereas obviously if I don't build any more copters, eventually the anti-air just runs out of usage, right? Get the hit on this infantry. I accidentally moved this artillery into rockets range. My opponent either... I think they have to hit this anti-air anyway, so I kind of got away with it, but definitely a mistake. And what I do here, actually, which is something I was really happy with, is I brought on the medium tank down here. And if we move planner it, you'll see the reason I did this. Obviously, it does partially hold this area, but actually what I was doing was I was calculating Von Bolt super, and I realized if I brought on the medium tank here, it pulled the missile down here. And it just hit these 2 medium tanks. And obviously, my opponent doesn't have any units here. You know, they have an artillery, but it's 1 HP. Never going to be able to get to the fight. But it just completely eats my opponent's super. Instead of it going directly to, like, this central front, I actually managed, yeah, to find a way to pull it just to these 2 medium tanks. And basically make it completely worthless. Like, obviously, my opponent is still going to want to hit it. But just to delay these medium tanks. But it's just hitting these 2 units that my opponent can't kill. They can't push forwards in this area. They might get this city. Maybe this port eventually, but... they can't make any pushes here, so the super's just going to get eaten by these tanks. And that's exactly what's going to happen, is, yeah, because I made this purchase, it put enough funds value here. Like I said, Ex Machina hits the place with the most funding. I had the most funds value here, and it just completely ate the super, so I was super happy with this play. They do end up attacking the city, so it goes back to 24 to 20. Start pulling their units back, getting some heals, go for the center. The rockets do hit the anti-air. I think this was a mistake, probably, because I think this tank could have hit it. But maybe they wanted to get the first strike, but I think they could have hit my artillery instead. I got a much bigger hit. Punished by positioning mistakes. Moving units centrally. Get a big first strike. 2-hit KO on my tank. I lose most of an infantry. I lose the whole infantry. I get the interrupt on this capture. 2 more tanks and infantry from my opponent. Or the infantry moving towards the center. Once again, kind of giving up this left area. I'm definitely going to try and prey on that. I lose this infantry on this aggressive city, but I've already got the capture, so I'm totally fine with that at this point, to be honest. Another thing that Blackstorm did, by the way, is it actually delays my opponent's city over here, which is actually quite substantial too, because it puts an extra turn on this one. Which means it's an extra turn to start capturing this one, so it's actually quite significant in that regard too. Mass damage, there's a lot of funky things like that, where it just kind of like really screws up the timing on my opponent's expansion. Whereas I'm like now like 3 turns ahead on these cities, and I was already a turn ahead, right? So like I'm just getting even more ahead, like. Snowball's pretty fast. So I think another mistake I made here is I keep fighting in the middle at this point. Once my opponents drop Makata and kind of slowed this down, and they start pulling all their forces into the center, I think it's fine for me, honestly, just to retreat and just kind of wait. Because, you know, these medium tanks are going to start pushing out. My opponent won't be able to do much about that, and, you know, especially because they're pulling all the forces away. But if I can just get these 2 medium tanks moving up and just try to, like, reinforce this central area, I think I'd be in a really good spot. But I do end up just going for kind of an aggressive turn. I actually end up losing a lot here. Mainly because I get some low rolls on this tank. I think if I killed this tank and I got a hit on this artillery, I may have been okay. Because, you know, if I finish this tank off, I think I didn't hit with this infantry, which may have killed it. Then I could get a first strike on this artillery and then have my artillery in a good defensive position covering these units, and it may have been fine. But I end up just kind of overextending, playing a bad fight, and it's going to end up hurting a lot. Even though I have more tanks coming to reinforce and stuff. I actually had to go for the heal instead, because they leave an infantry here to cover this port. I don't just want to lose mine for no reason and lose my pressure there. Tank B-copter. So yeah, a bit of a mistake here again from me. Like, I definitely had issues this game. I think I did a lot of great turns where I was like making my opponent move their army around, and then I had turns where I made their army move around, and I just didn't respect where suddenly that I was a little bit weaker. So yeah, they're all gonna push in, break a lot of my units here, start capturing this city back. Anti-air moves to the center. And they get a big hit on my artillery. So it kind of screws my position. Oops, apologies. Let's just re-roll that, shall we? Yeah, big hit on my artillery here, so that feels kind of bad. I lose the infantry, take another big first strike. I think at this point, like Andre was on the Discord, said, "Oh, Snitch is dead," and I was like, yeah, kind of looks bad. I didn't feel like I was dead, to be honest, but definitely a bad turn. Losing a lot of units. A lot of value down the drain. But at the same time, I was like, I don't know. I have like some reinforcements here. This copter's fine for now. I have 2 tanks. I have these 2 medium tanks down here. Like, I have forces, you know, to like kind of make a comeback, I felt like. My anti-air picks up this copter. Finish up this tank. Get a big hit on this tank. Put it to 2. Finishing off this copter with an infantry. It actually does 2 damage. I thought that was crazy. I thought I'd have to double hit it. But this copter, or this one infantry was crazy. Moving more tanks in to support a counterattack. And I start moving my medium tanks up, trying to threaten some of these units that my opponents left here on the right. Because they don't really have any units to like threaten these other than the artillery. And one of them is extremely low. So it doesn't really have any offensive pressure right now. Moving another copter to reinforce. 2 more tanks. 3 more tanks, in fact. So yeah, while it was a really bad turn for me, I actually don't feel too bad overall. I have some good reinforcements prohibiting my opponent from pushing any further, should they want to. I think I accidentally left that infantry there, right? Did I move it? Yeah, I think I accidentally left its AHP infantry here and didn't move it, so that was definitely a mistake. Oh, I end up swinging around and getting this free hit on this infantry with this copter, which also puts it out of range of my opponent's anti-air and threatens all these units up here when my opponent doesn't have any air defense. So I thought that was pretty good. Yeah, for some reason I didn't move this infantry. I must have just forgotten about it. Although it doesn't really have many places to run anyway. I guess I could have ran it up here just to waste more time or something, but or on the mountain maybe, but still, either way, it's probably gonna die. So probably gets a 2 hit on this infantry. Start pressuring my infantry on the city. They do go for the capture, but once again, this is within the tank line. So while it does pull vehicles to the right, it's totally defendable. You get a hit on my anti-air, but it's already scored a copter, so not the end of the world. Start finishing off some of my tanks with attacks. I do lose the artillery here. They get a big hit on the infantry. And I'm slowly building towards another Blackstorm as well. This is another thing to keep in mind. Like, even though I'm losing the fights, I am ahead in income, and also I'm quite ahead in power as a result. And I think if I can get my power again before my opponent does, it could be really influential. I was kind of surprised my opponent moved this up here. I don't know if he could have moved down to the city, but he isn't really covering anything with the rockets right now. It's kind of a really awkward spot, but it does move it out of the range of the copter as well. I guess losing the rockets to a copter, even if the anti-air gets the return kill, is still favorable for me. So I suppose they were waiting until they had more army set up to pressure properly. Finish off this infantry. Move this infantry up here, try to pressure some of these neutral cities. Get a copter hit on this tank. Finish it off with a 2-hit, get a big first strike on this tank. Actually finish that off with the copter as well, so I get 2 tanks here, which is really good. They're both full HP as well. Move up, get the interrupt on this infantry. I don't want to give this city for no reason. And like I said, really easy for me to reinforce from this area. Move another tank up, try to pressure on the left, and, you know, also applying pressure at the center as well. Interrupt the city with this medium tank. Obviously, it is a medium tank, and they have a lot of artillery here, but I just want to stop these captures, and also just force my opponent to keep kind of committing resources here. And I have 2 medium tanks here as well. And with the 2 artillery, they're very in the open. My opponent doesn't really have a lot of units to wall. They do have units, but it's going to force them to, like, give up on the center. And I might lose the 7 HP medium tank, but then I have a full HP medium tank on a city, you know, so my opponent can't really make, you know, enough attacks here to be super worth it, I feel like. That's kind of why I moved in here. I built an infantry down here. This infantry's like sneaking around trying to get my comm tower and stuff, but I finally dropped an infantry here. I was trying to get a turn to do it, so that I could just start moving up and capturing these properties while I have these medium tanks kind of causing a lot of chaos. And I built 2 tanks and a copter. I ended up just joining onto the tank on the city because it was 1 HP anyway. Pull my anti-air back. They do start trying to capture my comm tower, but I do have 4 turns here to deal with this, so I'm not feeling too bad about it. They take an artillery hit on this medium tank and this medium tank. But you see, this only puts it to 6 HP, and I'm on a city, so I'm just going to go back up to 8 HP. And they have no other units to actually pressure this medium tank, other than the artillery. They actually ended up getting an anti-air hit on this copter. Probably just didn't see it, or I just didn't care. I'm not sure which, to be honest. Rockets moves down again. They start trying to capture the city. This Rockets has pretty good control, covering this property capture. Just doing more damage to my tanks. Walling off the artillery. Using a T-copter actually, which I thought was pretty clever. They finish off this medium tank with a regular tank. Trying to pressure my units. Anti-air's moving down. Trying to finish off my anti-air, but don't quite get it. They put another copter, tank, artillery, infantry. And then, yeah, like I said, my super advantage, you know, obviously I'm losing the fights, but that means my supercharge is a lot faster. Hit another Black Storm. That's another 30k value. You know it is. Classic Hawk. And yeah, what I actually realized here, I think this was a really big turn for me, is my opponent's formation, especially with Black Storm, actually enables me to pick off this Rockets, which I think is a really big swing, because it kind of diffuses all my opponent's pressure on this area, and completely removes that Rockets from play. End up finishing up this tank, get a big hit on this anti-air, finish it off, maybe with my anti-air, not quite, 1 HP. Start capturing these properties aggressively. Move my tank up, just get a big hit on this tank. Finish off this infantry. You know, suddenly I've completely diffused my opponent's army on the left. You know, this Rockets was a big part of, like, all these offensive pressures, but with the Black Storm, I managed to find a way to break through my opponent's hold. And just push all my units up. Finish off this infantry. You know, and obviously, apologies for the ticking sound. I suppose the beeping sound. Just my dehumidifier. Obviously, again, it's so much easier for me to reinforce this area. This is another attack my opponent is making where I have the reinforcements here, and they're not really getting any properties or anything, you know? They're not really winning anything off this, they're just fighting for material, and it's much easier for me to get material back here. Obviously, they are winning something, but, you know. I picked up this infantry on the comm tower as well. It just felt like a good turn to get it off while I'm peeling back with my medium tank. I put an artillery down here to help cover some of these recaptures, slash help my medium tank out. My opponent is still pushing forwards. They do actually Ex Machina. Once again, I move planted it. I managed to pull it over here on these reinforcements. Not great for me, because obviously I'm relying on them a lot. I was just talking about how useful it is to be fighting near my factories, but my opponent's army is kind of diffusing, you know? They only have 4 tanks now in the center. All of them are heavily injured. They have this anti-air, not super useful against any of these tanks. This tank very injured, this anti-air very low. They have a copter coming, but I have a copter here already as well. We do get the interrupt of this property capture. Start capturing this property again. T-copter moving forwards to cover for these artillery. Do finish off my anti-air. Start peeling back tanks to get healed again. Trying to get a retreat going. Still trying to get this property, but obviously it's a little bit... I mean, it's only one turn left. I do have to send a unit there to finish it off, but very, very easy for me to do. Peel my infantry back, get a big hit on this anti-air. So now my opponent has no anti-airs, basically. They only have copters to deal with my air units. Finish off this capturing infantry. Get another infantry on the mech. Get a 2-hit with my tanks. So I have like 3 full HP tanks here to like 1 half HP, 1 2 HP, and a copter, you know. This tank's coming forwards, but it's not in range yet. So I actually ended up defusing my opponent's attack pretty well, I thought. Start moving up with this artillery and walling off. Put a second artillery and a copter. Just figure, you know, if I can match my opponent's indirect pressure here, I can kind of move up, get a big swing, and then get indirect trades that should be able to protect me, you know. So, just again, building artillery to hold my defensive side. Just want to prohibit this push where I can. I'd love to try and save this city. We'll see if it's possible. Moving all the units up here to get healed. You know, they're completely giving up on this center fight now. I've perfectly managed to stop the attack. And once again, they're moving units down here on the right, trying to pressure my soul base. Finally finish their expansion as well. Move up, get the interrupt on this unit here. Bring up copters to hold position, because they don't have any anti-here as well. Copters are very relevant here. They didn't build an anti-here as well. All they have is the copter, so, you know, getting a hit like this, even if the tanks come in, I always have a lot of copters to like hold the line. Even got a third one. But yeah, no anti-air for my opponent now. They didn't build anti-air down here, they built infantry instead. So once again, I just swing over to the right where I see they have a weakness of like not having any anti-air in this area. I just start overloading it with all my copters. Pushing more tanks into the center. They also built the artillery here now, by the way, to lock all these cities, which I thought was kind of funny. And yeah, I just end up pushing forwards here. I break an artillery, move my artillery up. If they want to hit this medium tank or whatever, like obviously the artillery needs to be hitting the medium tank. It's the only way my opponent could deal with it that isn't like copters. But yeah, I push through here, just smash an artillery. I have 2 artillery in reserve, and the medium tanks are really far forwards. You know, if my opponent wants to commit to these indirect attacks, you know, I have so many artillery in reserve ready to hit back. Like even if they swing around and hit this one, I can hit with this one. Like I actually felt really confident in this position, and this is why I kind of built up these indirects, so I could just kind of like push forward and make a wall. Build an anti-air here, ready to cover this copter. Another anti-air over here to cover these copters. So just kind of preemptively, like I noticed my opponent didn't build any new ones, and it looks really bad for them, so I just build my own new ones, like thinking of this being a problem. They get an indirect hit here on this tank. Copter swings in, hits my tank, not quite in range to deal with that. Moving their units out. Copter coming down here, they do finish off my tank. But like I said, this artillery can't hit my medium tank, you know, and I come down a little bit of value here. I give up a tank for an artillery, but it's the only answer my opponent has to this medium tank, you know, is the artillery right now. So if I crush the artillery, eventually my medium tank just becomes unstoppable. So that's kind of what I'm aiming for. My opponent does build another anti-air now. They build a mech here as well. I guess they just didn't have much money this turn because there's so many repairs. They are ready to repair a lot of units. Get a big indirect hit on this tank. Move my infantry down, ready to start capturing some of these properties. Just gonna try and make an income change. Swing in here. My copter was already low, so I just traded, you know, 4 for 5. Like a 7 hit on a full copter is always really valuable. If your copter's already chipped, you know, and I have more copters in reserve, I think this is always worth it to just kind of throw a 7 HP at a 5, because the first strike is so, or a 7 HP at a full, because the first strike is so strong that it really does a lot of damage to my opponent with an already weakened unit. So I always think it's very valuable. Moving these units up here. This is kind of a weird formation, but this tank, it cannot, like I said, because I have 2 artillery here, my opponent only has 1 tank to hit them. It's kind of weird, because you don't want to hit this artillery and just get hit by another artillery, right? It's a really strange situation, but when you have 2 artillery, they can actually cover each other very easily from a single attacker. And yet none of these other units, like this is 1 HP. This copter could fly down, but it's only 5 HP. But yeah, you don't really want to swing in here and hit this, because then you just take a full indirect hit, and I have the medium tank covering except for this. But what I was doing was covering this infantry. I thought my opponent might just kind of like sack the tank, maybe, just to like run down here and like try and hit this infantry, because I think if they get this infantry low, it really limits how much I could do. Like I felt like keeping this unit alive was really, really important, just so I can start pressuring these properties. Because the income is like kind of evened up now again, 24 to 23, and I really want to start pushing an income lead where on this side where I'm kind of winning. I built 2 tanks copter and drop another infantry here. Yeah, I should move in with some more hits, get a free hit on this mech, you know, wall off my tanks, get another copter coming in. And I also have a lot of tanks up here as well now, so I can kind of start pressuring the left as well. My opponent's starting to move forwards again. Got this anti-air covering. This copter swings over to the left. Once again, they start going for this property. I'm over it, man. Leave my properties alone. I have a mech here moving down. We get the hit of this infantry. This copter comes down. I manage to pick off my tank. Another copter's coming. Artillery pulling back. They finish off my copter with their weakened copter. They build another artillery, infantry, another infantry on the top side. My opponent's actually struggling a lot with money right now because they're doing so many repairs. Not to say it's the wrong play, but it's just kind of like a result of the fact that I won the fight in the middle. So once again, you know, this comes into play where this area is so easy for me to reinforce. I pick up this infantry, get the interrupt on the cap, get a big hit on this artillery. It's pretty much the strongest part of my opponent's formation here because they only have one tank and like 2 anti-air, right? So if I take out this artillery and I have like multiple tanks here, my opponent's tank can't really fight back without having the artillery to defend it. So I have 5 tanks and an anti-air to 1 tank, 1 copter, 1 artillery, 2 anti-air, right? These tanks are too weak to get here. So I actually have a really, really strong formation here on the side. So I'll capture this port. Once again, just wall off this unit. Just try to get these captures, you know? Take a first strike on this tank because this anti-air is actually limited by the forest, so it can't reach this copter. Swing my other copters around. Once again, got this double artillery formation just walking around, kind of defending each other from any aggressive attacks. Probably takes a first strike on the tank here, which I thought was weird, because obviously this copter's going to die, but I guess they're just feeling like this is lost, so they want to get as much damage as they can, maybe, to stop the push. Get a big first strike on the tank here, finish it off with the anti-air. But it's very strange for my opponent to be going so aggressive, you know? Like I said, it's so easy for me to reinforce here. Any attacks they take, I'm easily going to get back and be able to fight, you know? I guess they have this mech here trying to cover as well, but I thought it was pretty weird. They start going for aggressive captures on my cities, moving more copters down here, indirects moving forwards again. They build tank, infantry, tank. They need to build more units up here, you know, they're still going very aggressive, but I felt like this was just too much for my opponent. And you'll see how it kind of just falls apart very quickly. Get this copter kill. Finish off this anti-air. Finish off this artillery. Get some interrupts on these central captures. Yeah, I found a way here. Yeah, I can move the copters in. I can get a big hit on this artillery. Just one-shot it, basically. With the medium tank, and then this medium tank has so much offensive pressure, you know. My opponent may have like two anti here to like cover my copters, but I'm kind of copter overloading a little bit, and yeah, this medium tank is quickly becoming unanswered again. You know, I'm just constantly trying to pressure parts of my opponent's army that they need to deal with certain units like this medium tank, right? They need these indirects, but this indirect can't really sit here and hit me unless they get a really good wall, you know. And then I just hit it anyway, you know, because I was like, screw it. If I take out this indirects, then this medium tank is super free for a really long time. Moving my indirects up as well to cover. Get my anti-air moving up. You know, my copters might get pressured here, but again, you know, losing copters to anti-air is actually really good for charge building. So it could be quite annoying for your opponent. Choose not to hit this anti-air because I don't want to take a big mech hit on my tanks. Start capturing this property as well, now 25 to 22. Because of this, my formation down here, I'm just starting to get all these properties back, you know. You could definitely argue this is a bit aggressive for me as well on the weaker side, but I have so many units here, like, it's not really the same, because I pulled a lot of units here from, you know, the air units and units from the left onto the right, so while it is harder for me to reinforce this area, with the medium tank advantage and me kind of, like, crippling my opponent's indirects, I do feel pretty confident about it. They actually move in to get first strikes on my units here. Like I said, you know, this double artillery formation is really annoying to play against, because it just kind of guarantees, you know, you're going to take an indirect hit if you don't move forward and hit them both. My opponent kind of chooses not to. I do take a lot of damage here on the copters. Definitely sucks. And my indirect did get, oh, my anti-air, sorry, did get kind of blasted, so. I also went for the interrupt here on this capture. I think I didn't mention that. First strike on my tank. Once again, though, Blackstorm is charged. And again, you know, it's kind of something you have to think about against Hawk. There's a lot of scenarios where my opponent does this, where they take big first strikes on the anti-air. And kind of like playing against Andy, I guess, you kind of just, you have to really deal more damage, because a 4 HP anti-air with a power buff is actually still very relevant. So because my opponent doesn't finish these units off, you know, I'm going to have a 4 HP artillery, obviously not full, but still very noticeable in comparison to a 2 HP, and it has the power buff of 10%. They actually ended up dropping a medium tank here as well, finally, for them. But, you know, you are going to see that, like, once again, Black Storm, 30k value. It's just a consistent 30k. You love to see it. And yeah, I just started super aggressively pushing on this area. My opponent started pulling back. They realized they're overwhelmed. But now I'm going to really go in, like a viper on this left side. Start capturing these properties aggressively again. Finishing off all these tanks, moving in. You know, I have such a numbers advantage now. My opponent built a mech here as well, you know, so they don't even have any, like, the medium tank went here, so as soon as I saw this down here, I know this area is super, they have no resources here at all, you know, so I immediately start pushing in super aggressively, like, any trade backs my opponent is going to get is going to be nothing. And here's what I mean, you know, this was an 8 HP copter. I hit it with my 4 HP anti-air and get 7 damage, like, it's still so much value, and it's just because my opponent takes a first strike and they just leave it alive, you know. And not to say that necessarily could have killed it without taking much damage elsewhere, but when they go for this aggressive attack, they have to be you have to be cognizant of the Black Storm coming. And it definitely, I wouldn't say necessarily caught them off guard, but I think they didn't expect to take, you know, such a strong counterattack. Tank first strike, 4 HP, artillery finishes off the 3 HP tank. Finish off the tank with this copter. I was move planning a lot here, trying to work out a solid way to deal with Machina as well. Swing round, finish off this anti-air outside of the medium tank's range as well, so I can't get first struck. And I found the way to deal with it, and that's to drop a Neo tank. So I go Neo tank, anti-air infantry. And once again, Machina comes down and it hits this square of units here, which featured a 5 HP tank, I think a 1 HP copter, or 2 HP? Yeah, a 2 HP copter. Hang on, the Machina disappeared. Take me back! Don't break! Oh my god, it's broken. Right, hang on. Yeah, I hit this reinforcing copter, and once again I felt like I really played well around Machina this game, and it's a big example of how you can, and especially on maps with stuff like free landers. You know, there's quite a few maps in League that have free landers or free black boats, and these kind of maps you can really punish Von Bolt super by just stacking your units correctly. So once again, you know, I move planned out. I found if I bought a Neo tank and I had these units in this formation, it would hit the missile here, and it just completely wastes my opponent's missile, you know. And you see the value differences too. You see how much value I got from this attack. You know, I've kind of been behind on unit value the whole game, and suddenly I'm double my opponent after that last turn. They end up building another mech here. You know, they only have 12k. They're doing so much on repairs, and you know, they're taking so much financial damage per turn. And you could argue maybe they're over repairing, but they have to get these units back in the fight somehow. And they, you know, they don't have any money for a medium tank here. As soon as I saw it here, I just push in here really aggressively, you know, because I know they're taking all these repairs. I know they're moving all these units onto cities to kind of get them back in the fight. And I know that they can't build any units to hold this top area. Another mech comes down, but obviously that can't hold 5 tanks, especially when I'm getting first strike. They start moving down here on the right, try to get some return fire. Finishing off my indirects if they can to protect their medium tank. So you see they go for the same plan I am. You know, you have a medium tank, you want to limit the indirects so that your opponent doesn't have a good counter for it. Copter comes down, gets a swing on this artillery. Our opponent's healing these units, they get a hit on this infantry. Finish it off. You know, moving their army up. And then they end up just resigning. And, you know, I honestly can't blame them. I think this area up here is total disaster at this point, you know, like, I can move in, finish off this mech, get these hits here. I sit on the factory, get a first strike on the tank. My opponent has no units here to reinforce. You know, they have this useless anti-air sitting here against 5 tanks. It won't be able to accomplish anything. This front is totally lost. They're not doing too badly down here, but once I capture this factory, you know, or even just limit it, my opponent's production is so limited that I'll just start taking over all the properties on this side, and it'll be pretty much irrecoverable. And I'll even have a Neo tank down here already, you know, and my opponent isn't even getting enough money per turn to build a Neo tank to even match this, right? Like, this is such an aggressive tech up for me, and it was mainly to pull the Ex Machina, but yeah, my opponent can't even build tools to deal with this, you know. They were trying desperately to get some of these cities back, but I think I'm capturing this, yeah, in 2 turns. My opponent won't be able to stop this, really. And yeah, I'll just have infantry moving up here, just capturing all these properties, taking the comm tower. It'll be pretty much impossible for them to come back once this factory falls. But yeah, really good game. I was really happy I was finally able to defeat Slame. Like I said, they're a really great player. They've been besting me a lot lately. I was really happy that I was able to finally take them down. And yeah, I thought it was a really good game. Lots of really interesting fighting. Really showed the dynamic, I think, between Hawk and Von Bolt, and, you know, the advantages you get from Black Storm compared to Machina. Machina as a power is very controllable, you know? If you plan well around it, and you saw me do it pretty much every time in this game, you can plan where it's going to strike and limit how effective it could be for your opponent offensively. Either forcing them to hold onto it for longer, which obviously feels really inefficient because then you're just wasting power charge, or forcing them to blow it inefficiently and kind of waste it, like they did on the medium tank turn, like they did on this turn. So yeah, it's a really solid game plan against Von Bolt and a really good way to play around it. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of CO Select. Thank you guys very much for checking it out. If you did enjoy it, make sure to leave a like. It really helps out the channel. You can also subscribe for more content like this. My name has been Snitch. I hope you guys have a great day, and I will see you guys on the next episode. Bye!